Too often, we feel like we're alone, with no one to talk to or nobody that really understands. I want you to imagine a world where you are truly alone, no one else. You search for people, but all that remains are just shadows. In tonight's video, we're going to dive into a compelling yet fictitious story on Reddit. Is anyone left? ROP starts his story like this. I woke up yesterday morning and everyone was gone. My mom, who normally wakes me up to go to school, never came to get me up. I ended up waking up at 9:45, 2 hours after school had started. I immediately got ready to go in the car and go to school. I rapidly pulled out of my driveway without checking my rearview mirrors, and I hit a car passing by. I got out to go apologize and go over the damages, but as I was beginning to speak, I noticed something peculiar. There was nobody in the car. The car was running, but nobody was in it. I don't even think it was moving when I hit it. I began to freak out, thinking some sort of ghost was driving the car. But then I realized that the car I hit wasn't the only one idle on the street. Down the entire road, cars were parked, still running. Some had veered off, lightly hit some trees. Some were ridden up against the curb. Others just remained in the road untouched. I thought some elaborate prank was being pulled on me until the smell of smoke hit my nostrils. There was a fire somewhere. I followed the scent towards our local park. When I arrived, the fire was hard to miss. A whole fucking commercial airplane had crashed into the baseball field. I sprinted towards the downed plane, checking to see if anyone was injured, or if there was anything I could do to help. I reached the plane to find that nobody was there. Not a soul. Not even blood either. Just an empty, burning airplane. At this point, I started to panic. I hopped back into my car and drove to school. And as you can guess, there was nobody there. In fact, there was nobody anywhere. I was alone as far as I knew. I drove onto the highway and past all the idle cars that lay dormant, past the empty buildings, the empty houses, the empty parks, the empty schools. I was all fucking alone. I drove into the city. Everything was barren. Nobody was walking down the streets, nobody in the offices, nothing, just me, a teenage boy standing in the middle of a ghost town. At first, upon realizing I was actually alone, it seemed like it'd be quite fun. I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, with nobody to tell me otherwise. I had the city to myself. That perception of my situation lasted until nightfall last night. I had spent my days robbing stores. I later realized that I wasn't really robbing anyone since there was no one to rob, and breaking shit because, well, why not? I could do as I pleased. It had been a long day and a strange one, so I decided to drive back home. I found my dream car, a jet black Audi R8, and I drove it home. I pulled it into my driveway, went in, climbed into bed, and fell asleep. The sound of whispers woke me up at midnight. I sat up in my bed, listening for the source. I flipped on my lamp and followed the whispers to my basement. Curious, I flipped on the light to see if anyone in my family had finally come home. But right when I flipped on the lights, the whispers halted. My empty basement lay in front of me. Disappointed, I walked back upstairs and climbed into bed. Then the whispers started again. Except this time, they were more forceful, like a mother disciplining her son in the middle of church. My head pounded, my chest felt weak, my legs began to wobble. I remained in bed, fearful, but also interested in where those whispers were coming from. I decided to go outside and get some fresh air. The moon was out, and the streetlights were on. The empty cars still remained. I elected to take a quick walk around the block and get back to sleep. That's when I started to see things. Shadows would move in my peripheral vision. And when I darted my eyes toward the movement, there would be nothing. I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. As I continued on my walk, I noticed silhouettes inside my neighbor's house. I sprinted up to the door and knocked, looked in through the window on the top of the door, and I saw a shadow move in the darkness of the house. I screamed, "Is anyone inside?" No response. I tried opening the door myself, but it was locked, so I smashed open a window in the front room. Desperate, I know. but I had been alone for almost 24 hours and it was starting to get to my head. I dove inside and stood up. I had gashed my arm on the broken glass. The blood dripped down onto the carpet, and there was a lot of it. Almost instantly, I began to feel the world spin. Numb with pain, I clicked on the small lamp sitting on the desk next to me. The lamp filled a quarter of the room with dim light. I fell onto the carpet, arms still gushing blood, and tried crawling towards the kitchen. When I looked up to see where I was going, a shadow moved across the wall and over to the window I had busted. It was a shadow of a person. Shocked, I laid and watched as the shadow made its way across the wall, moving eerily along the white paint. Whispers accompanied its movement, brushing softly against my ears. I crept towards the kitchen, still lightheaded, and wrapped a towel around my arm. By shuffling through the cabinets, I managed to locate some Advil. I downed 3 pills to help ease the pain. I sat on the tile ground, dazed and confused from my recent experience. I looked up. A shadow was floating right above me. I slowly reached out its foggy arm, reached up, and I touched the cabinet door. The cabinet slammed shut. Right when the wooden cabinet collided with the wall, I ran. I jumped out the broken window and sprinted down the street towards my house. As I ran, I turned around and saw the most frightening thing I have ever seen. Shadows of people. Hundreds of them were strolling behind me in the moonlight, with no flesh creating the shadows. They were all blacker than the night, each protruding out of the darkness like a bunch of human-shaped black holes. All around me, the town was lit up with shadows. A bit of an oxymoronic sight, still frightening to say the least. Loud whispers surrounded me, some nearby, some far away, yet still audible. I wasn't alone at all anymore. I noticed that as the shadows entered the streetlights, they disappeared into thin air. The darkness was all that could accompany them. I've never ran faster. I climbed back up into my bed, flipped on every light in the house. I slept with them on. This morning, when I woke up, there were no more shadows, just me again, alone. I'm writing this post to see if there's any humans left. I've already posted on every social media I could think of, and I've gotten no responses. Please, if anyone knows what the fuck is going on, let me know. I need help. This marks the end of part 1 of a 4-part series that this Redditor has posted. Now, there are some theories that I could go into as to what this Redditor is experiencing. And one of those theories that actually interests me is that he's not even on Earth. I will drop the link to this series in the description if you guys want to read ahead. But for now, this is Trick Book, and y'all have a good night.